everyone. Welcome to Keto and Crime and Thought Crime. Today, as you may have seen on my community board, we've got QAnon. What is it? What are they? Should we care? And I really actually had a lot of fun researching this. It was quite interesting. I got into some stuff that I didn't know that I thought was interesting, and we're going to have a good time. But before we get into that, I just want to say a marvelous shout out to all my channel members and patrons. I couldn't do it without you. I really appreciate it. And also with the hilarity of this episode, I'm going to be squeezing the snowball a lot. So hope you enjoy it. And with that being said, let's dive into it. Oh, if you would like to subscribe to the channel, please do that below. You can also join up with my wonderful channel members and patrons. Those links are down below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Thank you to all the new subscribers. I really appreciate it. And also, if you'd like to buy some merch, that link's down below too. But the most important thing you can do for the channel is just watch and like and comment. Even an emoji helps. So I really appreciate it. And with that, let's get into QAnon. First thing I want to say when diving into this theory, I'm not sure what to call it, whether it's a theory, a movement, a cabal, to quote something they like to say. Whatever it is, it's weird. And I want you to know that it is like most conspiracy theories, going all the way back to whenever the first person decided that they would go alternate of the existing facts and come up with their own theory, that every single conspiracy theory, especially the ones that I have studied in relation to QAnon, there is a grain of truth running through all of them. Just enough to make people who are, kind of gullible is the wrong word. But people that have a very inquisitive mind or very skeptical, it's very easy to trip the level from, real skepticism to reaching for what you think might be the causes. For example, something as mundane as, why is Tracy wearing a t-shirt, a Warframe t-shirt, with a dress-up vice principal of a middle school type shawl or cover-up? And that is because Tracy got a little chilly while she was making these videos. So there you go. But is that really what happened, or is Tracy sending some secret signal out to her people, letting them know that the eagle has landed? And laugh if you will, but that is exactly how some of these conspiracy theories get started. And that's the most amazing thing I took away from all this research, is that it could be something as mundane as somebody doing something that would be considered unusual, and people just taking it and running it with it. So just remember, everything has a grain of truth. It's weird that Tracy has chosen this ensemble, but is it really indicative of a greater purpose other than Tracy was chilly? No. But let's get into it, shall we? What is QAnon in the greater picture of things? QAnon is, according to Wikipedia, a far-right conspiracy theory, and I'm going to argue that I found that it's not just far-right, but this is the Wikipedia answer. Far-right conspiracy theory alleging that a cabal or group of elites and the media are Satan-worshipping, cannibalistic, the P word that you cannot say on YouTube. And they are running a global child labor ring Again, can't say that on YouTube because Susan doesn't like that. And they are plotting against current President Donald Trump, who is fighting the cabal. And all the members of this group are awaiting the storm. The storm that Donald Trump, because he has infinite knowledge of what's going on, is going to bring on that grand day when he busts the entire cabal and brings it all crashing down. So they're awaiting the storm. And in this cabal are not only elite politicians, both Democrats and Republicans, like your traditional GOP, conservative, family values type Republicans that have been in power forever, those kind of Republicans, as well as all Democrat. It doesn't matter what a Democrat or independent's voting record is, they're part of this. Most of Hollywood, and Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, they were singled out, as well as George Soros. And I hear that name thrown around a lot, that they're all part of this. And who exactly is George Soros? Well, I did a little research because I wasn't entirely sure myself. George Soros is a Hungarian Jewish billionaire who is credited as the man that broke the Bank of England. Basically, this gentleman basically did investments that almost broke the literal central bank of England when they had to pay out his gains. And because he is a huge supporter of progressive ideology, he donates a lot to organizations such as the Democratic Party within the United States, because he did immigrate, that forward those types of policies. So he's a huge Democratic donor, huge progressive donor, and he was born in 1930. So this man is getting on, 9 years away from being 100 years old. And if you've ever seen him, I don't think he's the global head of a huge cabal. I think he's maybe just a few inches away from having to be spoon-fed by a nurse. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but this dude has more important things to worry about than funding some cabal. So that's who George Soros actually is. Now, I'm not going to delve deeply into him. There's a lot of other commentators on YouTube. Some of them are friends of mine. J.B. Gunner, for example. J.B. Gunner runs a pretty controversial set of channels. He is a conservative commentator. He and I don't agree on a lot, but he is a friend of mine. He's always been very supportive of me and has helped me in things like setting up channel. He has his own theories about George Soros, and I find his take very entertaining. He also has his own take on QAnon. He is an affinity on actually revealing the identity of Q, which we will get into that. And I'm not going to delve into that because he's much more talented and knows a lot more about it than I do. But I hear people that are far right talk about George Soros as if he's some big demon puppet master. And of course, we know money makes the world go round. But I just wanted to give you kind of a quick take on who this mysterious George Soros is that you hear thrown all over the place. So that's who he is. He's a very old Hungarian Jewish person, and because of the whole theory about Jewish people controlling banking and everything else, it just fits right into the whole massive algorithm of conspiracy theories. So that's George Soros. But George Soros is like one of the major funders of this cabal. And they are plotting a massive takeover of not just the United States, but the entire world to bring us together. And going back to even what we read about Chad Daybell, the whole thought of a one world government under some sort of antichrist. Well, the theories of QAnon fit right in with that because they taught the whole thing that a one world government is coming. What do I think about a one world government? I think in the next 100 years, it's quite possible that may happen because everything is going more global with the internet and everything else. We're a lot more linked. I do business with international clients all the time, so it's becoming a lot more mainstream, and I could see us going towards some sort of unified system 100 years in the future. Do I think that that's fulfilling some prophecy? I guess you could say it is because so many people have prophesied about that, but I just think it's a natural progression. I mean, I grew up on Star Trek, well, Star Trek The Next Generation. I grew up on Star Trek The Next Generation, as well as Star Blazer, Space Battleship, Yamamoto, a lot of different like sci-fi shows, Battlestar Galactica, and they all talk about a federation, Starship Troopers.
Young people from all over the globe are joining up to fight for the future.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
Federation that is essentially united the whole world. And so I guess that's why it's not so unusual to me, because I grew up with that ideology in television shows. The same with, Star Wars. The Force is kind of a unifying thing, although it's not a government, it's a thing, but we're not going to get into that. But anyway, that's my whole theory on this one world government. I think it's just a natural progression. Do I think I'll live to see it? I'm 46. I seriously doubt I will live to see it. Maybe some of the younger younger millennials, Gen Zers, Generation Alphas, which are actually, I learned something new, they're actually the generation born 2013 on, will probably live to see this become a reality. But that's my take on it. So let's talk about why the term QAnon to describe this movement that really believes that Donald J. Trump is the savior of the world. Let's talk about them.
Man, it's the shift. I can feel it coming. Some call it the Great Awakening.
You're wearing a shirt that says QWWG 1WGA. What does that mean?
It means where we go one, we go all.
QAnon is the people that believe in what Trump's trying to do to change our country.
That is.
Let's talk about the term Q. Where does that come from? Besides Star Trek The Next Generation, I think whoever came up with this was probably a fan like I am. Q is pretty cool. Q knew a lot, but it actually has a more fundamental meaning. Q is a level of government clearance, mainly directed to the United States Department of Energy, as well as Department of Defense. There was a couple of levels established by the Atomic Energy Act of 1954, which kind of kicked off our en masse nuclear research, project, and then later on NASA and all that. So they had two levels of clearance. Q, which was the highest level of clearance. So the people that had this clearance would see anything. I mean, everything. Think about it. You could walk into NORAD and see everything. Just that kind of clearance. And there was an L clearance, which was a lower level of clearance, but still pretty high when it comes to government clearances. And so the term Q literally refers to the highest government access within the United States, and therefore people with this clearance would be in the know about just about everything coming out of the U.S. government. All the, secret plans. I mean, skeptic or not, you have to know that the term black ops is actually a thing. My good friend over on the Atheist Edge, Jim Hall, he was a part of espionage in the Marine Corps. He spent his entire career with headphones on deciphering messages that were coming in from radio waves of proposed U.S. enemies, namely in the Middle East. So he knows that black ops is a thing. He actually has talked about it on my channel before. And also there's even deeper black ops when you get into the CIA, who has, done things like install puppet government. So yes, black ops is a thing. So somebody with this kind of clearance would know about black ops operations going on at the highest levels. And so that's why there is a reference to the letter Q. People with Q level clearance have to pass the most extensive FBI and CIA background check in existence, costing the government over $5,000 to conduct one search because of its accuracy and its thoroughness. So people that have achieved this level have achieved it. Now, ironically, Donald J. Trump is known in the movement as Q+, because he's not only Q level, he knows everything for another reason, but we're going to talk about that. Now, what about the term Anon? Simply stated, it stands for anonymous. And I'm going to get into this a little bit deeper later on, but it refers in part to the hacker group known as Anonymous. Now, I'm not saying they're part of QAnon. Don't come for me, Anonymous. That's not what I'm saying at all. But it comes from the types of message boards that this conspiracy theory was born off on the internet message board website known as 4chan. And I will talk more about that later. But a lot of this was born, conspiracy theories were discussed in mass on these Anon boards. So it, in one way, started from the anonymous movement, but then has kind of spiraled off, I think even out of their control. And now anybody that considers themselves part of this being in the know, being red-pilled, referring to the Matrix movies, it has nothing to do with being, you know, red-pilled as if you've become a conservative. It means red-pilled in that you know the truth. If you go back to the Neo conversation in the Matrix where he had the blue or the red pill, he could take the blue pill and stay in the naivety of living in the Matrix. Or he could take the red pill and know everything. So that's what they refer to as being red-pilled. And so anybody that's in this movement has been red-pilled, but yet they are members of this anonymous movement that is going to bring in the storm. So that's where the term Anon, Q, Anon, and Q actually also refers to a person, which we're going to talk about as well. Now, to understand what their fear is, we have to talk about what I consider some related conspiracy theories. And the first of those is the term known as the deep state. I'm sure you've heard of this, but it's been around for a long time. This is not a new theory. It's been around probably since the dawn of organized government, the belief that there's something deeper than what we see. I mean,
everybody's flipping sides all the time. It's fun and games, man. Fun and games.
Again, I'm a geek. X-Files was my jam. They talked about a deep state all the time. A deep state in their canon was, you know, linked up with aliens that were going to come back and repopulate the earth. So, yeah, a deep state refers to a government, a deeper government that's really in control, that's just lurking under the surface, ready to take over the world. It also has been termed by the adjective known as shadow government. And there is, as I said, with the above Q clearance, which is the grain of truth that runs through the term Q, there's a grain of truth here. We do have, most countries do, just like companies do, they have an emergency contingency plan for if something happens and, you know, all hell breaks loose. There is a plan on what will happen with our highest ranking leaders. You know, that's why we have NORAD. NORAD is housed somewhere in the mountains and in the Rockies. And NORAD tracks Santa Claus every year. So it exists, and it is actually a safe place that was built during the earliest days of the Cold War for the government of the United States to remain intact in case of nuclear war. So we do have a shadow government that is ready and willing to take over in the event the normal government collapses, whether it be through natural disaster or military action. So yes, there's that grain of truth. Is this something we should fear? Probably not, because it's good that we have those contingency plans. I suppose when you have a government, especially one as large and lofting as the American government, and I think it's too big for its own good, I've stated that many times, of course, there's always underlying threats to its safety. There's always people plotting. This is true even in a corporation. There's people plotting to oust people just above them to get themselves into control. So yes, there are people out there that are plotting to either, you know, step into the government as high-ranking themselves. I mean, look at politics. Politics has been dirty for years. There's always people plotting. And yes, there are anarchists and other extremist group out there plotting to overthrow the government. That stuff exists. But do I think there is a worldwide conspiracy of devil-worshipping P-words that are out there plotting and waiting to bring in a one-world government? not so much. The whole resurgence of the term deep state came about early in President Barack Obama's term because due to a Tufts University political science professor by the name of Michael Glennon, he asserted that Barack Obama was an agent of this double government or this deep state that was trying to prevent the storm. Because remember, Donald Trump has been tapped from his birth to be Q plus to actually free us and bring on this storm to free us of this deep state government. Well, according to further QAnon canon, if you will, when the storm arrives and all of these people are ousted and fall from grace, they're going to be housed in Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay prison. And remember what President Barack Obama did. He forced a closure of that prison camp. And so he tried to force a closure. It never happened. But because of that, and because this theory has been brewing for a while, they thought he was an agent of the deep state because he tried to close the place that all these people would be imprisoned at, which is a very specific theory. And so that's kind of what came with the resurgence of this theory. Then we get to 2016, the end of Obama's second term and the beginning of Trump's first term, the election year. It was probably one of the hottest, most contested elections ever in the history of the United States. And during that election, lots of people who might have avoided mainstream politics came out in support of Donald J. Trump. Not necessarily because of this prophecy, but just because, or this belief, but because he was the anti-politician. He was a celebrity that we all knew. Many of us loved. Trump was much loved before he ran for president. So a lot of people that avoided mainstream politics came out in favor of him. Among them were Steve Bannon, the editor-in-chief of Breitbart, which was a far-right news site created by Andrew Breitbart, and not only employed Steve Bannon, who became Trump's chief strategist, but also people like Milo Yiannopoulos. Lots of people that were on the far right fringes, if you will. And Steve Bannon is the one that coined the term alt-right. So he was a believer in a deep state. I'm not saying he's part of QAnon, but he was a believer in the deep state. And since he was Trump's chief campaign strategist, those ideas found their way into Trump's campaign. And even Trump mimicked them a couple of times, talking about a deep state or a swamp, if you will. Swamp, was kind of used interchangeably between a deep state or just a corrupt politics, as it were. And those were used interchangeably sometimes. And so you had not only people that were highly into conspiracy theories jumping onto this bandwagon and believing in the deep state or the swamp, you also had him talking to normies, people like me and you that might be sick of the swamp, the dirty world of politics, and he was going to clean it up. So that was a way of bringing in people and using threads of truth through this conspiracy theory to make it more attractive. And another person that kind of had long since kind of stayed out of mainstream politics that entered in during Trump was Alex Jones. Now, if you don't know who Alex Jones is, he is probably the conspiracy king. And I actually did a 3-parter on Alex Jones, which I will link right up here, including a review of one of the books he read in high school that kind of put him on his conspiracy theory path. And so Trump actually broke all kinds of protocol because he actually went on InfoWars, Alex Jones' show, and did interviews. Alex Jones did election coverage. Alex Jones, basically threw all of his weight behind Donald Trump. And that led to Donald Trump being elected. One of the many reasons that Donald Trump was elected now, which is how some of the QAnon movement was able to kind of sink its claws into the world of American politics. And I promise that I will not get any more political on this channel. I've learned my lesson about that. But I do have to speak on it when it relates to the crime or the topic at hand, like it does here. But why Donald Trump? Why, of all the figures in in the world would this particular conspiracy theory lump on to Donald J. Trump as a messiah figure? Well, the answer to that, you have to go back to other members of Trump's family. We have to start way further than Trump's family. We have to start in 1800s in the old Austrian Empire, when a young, brilliant scientist by the name of Nikola Tesla was born. Nikola Tesla, the namesake of Tesla Motors, Elon Musk's company, was a pretty well self-taught physics and engineering genius. He immigrated to the United States, where he was part of the Edison Machine Works in New York City before he went out on his own, and he did amazing things with electrical technology, electrical engineering. He developed a widely used alternating current induction motor and created some polyphase AC patents that he still holds to this day that have been licensed by Westinghouse, General Electric. Lots of things that Nikola Tesla did have been used to create the technology we have today, which is one reason that I think Elon Musk named his company after him. One of the last projects Nikola Tesla worked on was a literal push for wireless technology, wireless lighting, wireless electric power. And he was working on this in the 1920s in New York City when his company literally, Wardenclyffe, literally ran out of money. And he died in pretty much abject poverty in one of the hotel rooms that he lived in. He rotated between kind of an area of hotels in New York City where he lived, and he died there in abject poverty. Well, when he died, which is the saddest ending to a story I've ever heard, one of the saddest, he left behind lots of plans, lots of documents that can be very valuable. I mean, look at what the man created. So someone very close to Trump was tapped to go in and secure those documents, those leftover plans from Tesla, and organize them and bring them in and brief the government, namely the FBI, on them. And that man was John Trump. John Trump is the youngest brother of Fred Trump, Donald Trump's father, which if you want to know an in-depth history on the Fred Trump family, I will link my book review of the Mary Trump book up here. A lot of in-depth information there. Check that out. But John Trump was born in 1907. He was an engineering student, did very well in school. Started his foray into electrical engineering working with Fred and in the real estate development business that Fred started with their mother, Elizabeth, but was eventually forced out by both Fred and Elizabeth. But he had started his career doing the electrical work for all of Fred Trump's buildings and investment properties. But once forced out of the company, he decided he could do this in tandem by himself. So he attended the Polytech Institute of Brooklyn, which is now the New York University Tindon School of Engineering, and actually received his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, and then later his master's degree in physics from Columbia University. This man was highly educated. From there, he was a professor at MIT. He did a lot of work with the government on special projects such as advancements, perhaps even studying the wireless electrical technology that Tesla was working on. And in the 40s, shortly after Nikola Tesla's death, in the early 40s, he was tapped to go to his hotel, organize and study the plans that Nikola Tesla had left and brief the federal government on them. And he did that. So there is your connection. Trump's uncle saw some still not all declassified plans from one of the most brilliant inventors in the world that the government wanted his work. And that's not a secret. The government, wants to, the government kind of feeds off entrepreneurs and how to advance, what they're doing. So that wasn't unusual that they were after Tesla's work. and they were able to get him to basically translate it for them. And so, because John Trump got to look at what highly classified documents, they also believe that he passed this knowledge on to his nephew, Donald. After doing that briefing on the left works of Tesla, John Trump went on to work with the U.S. military and the British military during World War II. He developed many types of navigational radar and went on to develop lots of technology that was used and is still used by the United States today. So that's Trump's connection to the deep state. Now, you're saying, Tracy, this doesn't sound very interesting. Okay, we've got this group of people that believes there's this Satan-worshipping, child-hurting cabal out there that are just simmering under the surface, ready to usher in a world government and take over everybody and then breed their children. That's essentially some of it. But we're really only scraping the surface, folks. There is a lot of conspiracy theories that are weaved into this. You got to look at a lot of them to really bring it together because of the deep state thread that revolves or passes through so many conspiracy theories. QAnon, or people that believe in this movement, tend to believe, the ones that are actually QAnon, not just your basic conservative or even your basic Trump supporter who was not a conservative before, or your libertarians, or even, this is not just a conservative theory. There are people way on the left, such as anarchists, that actually believe this too. Maybe not the Trump part, but they believe this deep state theory. And because this thread kind of trolls through it, it loops in a lot of deep state related conspiracy theories, which are 9/11 truther. There are people out there that believe that 9/11 was an inside job. And that just from the way the buildings fell, the difference between melting steel and all of that, that it was a consorted, controlled demolition on the part of this deep state to bring in government surveillance of people, bringing us the Patriot Act, which was enacted by George Bush after 9/11. That's a deep state theory, that was created. That was a created tragedy. And there's a famous quote out there, never let a good tragedy go to waste when it comes to government. That was a way to creep in things like the Patriot Act, because supposedly the people that did it, got pilot's licenses and clearances and things that they should never have been able to get. And so as a result, this had to be a concerted effort. And so it brought in a belief that the government was just using it so that they could spy on us. And then you have things like the flat earthers. They're also in this movement. They believe that we've been misled about the shape of the earth. I don't understand how they think when all the photos of the earth are round, all the photos of the other planets are round, but yet they believe that they're flat. And it is a deep state conspiracy to keep the truth from us. Chemtrails. Oh, this is one of my favorites. My good friend, comedian Ian Harris, has a joke about chemtrails and hacky sacks. You need to check him out. He's on YouTube, Ian Harris. But the belief that chemtrails, which are really just evaporating water that come out of airplane engines, much like evaporation comes out of a car engine, they really believe that this is a mind control device put in place by the government to make us all sheeple. I got news for you. To make people sheeple, you don't need to use a special chemical. We are programmed that way, to be sheeple. Why do you think everybody rushes out to buy the newest Samsung or the newest iPhone? Sheeple. Then, of course, the central bank, being that currencies are controlled by governments, and that there's a centralized banking system in most countries that kind of control the ebb and flow of currency to keep everybody on the same currency. And you find this in all countries. And then you have the added theory, which could be related back to some of the earliest conspiracy books, of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, that there's some world conglomerate out there that kind of controls all the currency. That's an absolute true fact. Because of that, they believe that's also one step closer to world domination by this cabal. And that nothing that has ever happened in history was just by chance, that this is all leading towards that one world government, and it's going to be evil. And then from that, you have a lot of people that, from cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, not that that's not a conspiracy theory. Bitcoin and other cryptos are absolutely legitimate, and I actually like the fact that there's a decentralized, anonymous type of currency out there. But a lot of people in the QAnon movement and just conspiracy movements in general really believe in crypto. But I think it's a good thing. It's just another way to diversify your portfolio. And then, of course, let's get into the anti-vaxxers, because they're also heavily represented in this QAnon movement, because they believe vaccines are a way to make us weak, stupid, and even put tiny microchips in us to control us and track us. Go back to the Chad Daybell books. The chip was easily implanted. They believe this technology has been implanted in us from vaccines from day one. Along with the added effect, they might make certain people autistic. And there is no sound scientific evidence for any of that. If you want me to address it, I'll simply say that Penn and Teller on their show Bullshit do an excellent job breakdown of that particular theory. But basically, the term autistic has been broadened. It used to be just a very specific set of savants that, obviously lived in their own head. But now it has been broadened to include people like myself that are just socially awkward or, very, very introverted. It has been broadened and more people fit into that. Therefore, there is evidence that we have more people that are on the spectrum of autism today than ever before, but that's just because the definition has been broadened. And then there's lots of other theories. Lots of other evidence that other things may have something to do with it. The highly chemicalized food we eat. The fact that we have gotten away from physical activity. There's all kinds of reasons why that definition might have been broadened that don't revolve around vaccines. That's what I'm saying. And I don't want anybody to take it that I'm downing autistic people. That's not it at all. I'm just showing how that definition has been broadened. But these people are well represented within the QAnon movement. And then, of course, now with the latest iteration of the pandemic that we shall not speak of, anti-mask is a new... You find a lot of anti-masks and anti-vaccine people kind of melded into this movement. But why now? Why has this movement now suddenly exploded? Well, there's a lot of different reasons. And I'm going to cover those in part 2 of QAnon. And that'll be out for you tomorrow. And until then, thank you so much. Keto and crime.